Happy Sunday, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. I have received an abnormally high number of complaints about the standard meta, and I just wanted to take a moment and point out just how many decks are kind of what's happening in the meta in a broad sense of things, right? So, hopefully, this will convince you that Monstrous Rage doesn't necessarily need to be banned, and I'll kind of explain why. Maybe an unpopular opinion, but I can kind of hopefully walk through maybe what's going on through, Wizards of the Coast's kind of idea of whether or not to ban Monstrous Rage in Standard. So, first up here, we've got Best of One, kind of looking at Bronze to Mythic using an untapped third-party tracker. And you can see here the problem, the biggest complaint, right, is coming from this section. Boros Mice, Mono Red Aggro, Boros Auras, Mardu Aggro, and Rakdos Aggro are all largely same variations of the same mice deck, right, that's using the Emberheart Challenger and the Manifold Mouse and the Heartfire Hero. And Monstrous Rage is really kind of the one that's gotten the most heat out of that trifecta, or four cards, if you will. So Monstrous Rage is one that's a lot of people would like to see banned, and because of how much of the top of the tier is dominated by Monstrous Rage in Best of One. Now, keep this in mind that this data is from Magic the Gathering Arena, which has a Best of One hand smoother, which helps. It changes how often you will start a hand with 0 lands or 1 land, which in the long run makes it so you can shave like a land from your deck, which favors aggro ever so slightly, but it's kind of the reason why we see aggro dominating Best of One. They also needed to make Best of One the way that they did because that's what people wanted, right? So they're also balancing like a good game play from a high competitive level with what do people want from Magic the Gathering on their phone, right? And so I think a lot of people were saying that like 20-minute long control matches are not what I want to do, right? Like the modern mobile game, you get on your phone, you're going to play like 2 or 3 minutes and then you're going to move on, right? And so Mono Red allows you to do that, allows you to just kind of quickly play a game, right? And so I think it, is partly why they're not too concerned about it in Best of One. Now, that being said, tier 1, if you will, right? Tier A is a standard deviation above the other decks we're about to talk about, but Tier B are also all incredibly viable decks to take to Mythic, right? Is it Prowess is the one that exists because of the Quarry Steel Cutter, and this card has been seeing a lot of attention in Best of One and in Best of Three, and by no means is it a bad deck, right? Like this is seeing competitive play right now, and so it's not like being in Tier B is a bad place to be, right? You see other popular archetypes like Boros Burns, Celestia Rabbits, a new one with the Boros Goblins, Mono White Life Gain, Azorius Affinity, Gruul Delirium, Azorius Bats, Mono Red Goblins, Mono Black Midrange, Azorius Oculus, Esper Self-Bounce, Gruul Aggro, Mono Black Skeletons, 4-color Dinosaurs, Boros Convoke, Celestia Auras, Azorius Enchantments, Rakdos Lizards, Golgari Toxic, Dimir Self-Bounce, Mono Black Discard, Mono White Cats, Celestia Cage, 5-color Reanimator, Jeskai Oculus, Orsov Life Gain, Dimir Midrange, Azorius Control, Jeskai Convoke, Azorius Artifacts, and Jeskai Control. Now, all of these can be piloted to Mythic. All of these are viable decks in Best of One, showcasing a hugely diverse meta, right? Like if we go back even just a couple of years, the amount of decks that were in Tier B and in Tier A were so much less than this, right? And this has been a monstrosity of amount of data to sort through this many different archetypes, because when there's like 8 competitive archetypes, it's a lot easier to track everything and diversify everything as far as sorting the data in the tracker. So props to Untapped for being able to actually pick all of these out into separate archetypes, and you can kind of see some of them vary in popularity, right? Like Mono Black Midrange has 58,000 matches whereas like Boros Burn has 5,000, right? So there's some flexibility in like what is really popular, and you get to mono red and you've got 99,000 matches, right? So there's no doubt that people are overplaying mono red aggro, which is dependent on Monstrous Rage. But to say that the entire format is being ruined by Monstrous Rage, I think is a little bit of a bold statement when you see this much diversity, right? And this isn't even getting into the best of 3 competitive scene, right? Which this is an okay way to look at it, right? Is we can look at the data in best of 3 on Magic the Gathering Arena, and the best of 3 here is always still going to favor aggro because people like to like grind multiple matches to get to Mythic because that's the fastest way to climb, right? So this is going to not be a perfect representation of what we see in the paper scene or the competitive scene, right? For example, like the Pro Tour, the top 3 top 3 players were all playing Domain, which is also in Tier B, right? So keep that with a grain of salt. But we can see like mono red aggro, that one needs Monstrous Rage. Is it Prowess? That one needs Monstrous Rage. Jeskai Oculus doesn't though. Azorius Omniscience doesn't. Boros Mice does. Dimir Midrange doesn't. World Prowess does. Orsov Control doesn't, Domain doesn't, Celestia Cage, Mono Black Midrange, Dimir Self-Bounce, Dimir Bounce, Orsov Pixie, and Boros Convoke. So we see diversity in both best of 3 and in best of 1. You can kind of see why there's that complaint because, like, some of the top archetypes and some of the most popular archetypes are running the Monstrous Rage. But from a statistical perspective and from like a meta diversity perspective, I don't think it's at that point where it requires a ban, right? And I hope showcasing this to you kind of helps you understand why what they're looking at too, right? Because like they have their own tracker data, which is more immense than what Untapped is, because they have the data from everybody playing on Arena, right? And so they have a more complete picture of what this is grabbing a smaller percentage of. But if we get a big enough sample size, it should reflect the same thing that they're saying, right? And you can also look up like cards specific win rates and stats and things like that with the tracker to see just like how of an outlier the Monstrous Rage is. And if we like go here and let's just quickly like look up mono red aggro, and we can see like Monstrous Rage is going to be in the top, right? So like if we wanted to do a difference by whether or not the card has been drawn, we can see Monstrous Rage is like the number 1 card. If we go off of the in-hand win rate, it's the number 1 card. In your opening hand, we've got some smaller like Ghost Vacuum isn't typically played in best of 1, but I might be on best of 3. Yeah. So it drops down a little bit to number 4, but it's still a really important card for the archetype, right? So I do, if you wanted to get rid of mono red or decrease the amount of mice variants, Monstrous Rage is a reasonable card to pick, right? So, but anyway, that's enough rambling about the meta in general. I personally have been enjoying it because I love the fact that I can play 20 plus decks on my climb to Mythic, because I'm not playing any RCQs. I'm just enjoying myself with the diversity in Magic, right? And the other thing, though, that I do every Sunday is my meta breakers, and we will get to that. And so what I do is I use this tracker to everybody who has the Untapped tracker installed and isn't on mobile. Sadly, it doesn't work for mobile, but it will track your progress, and it allows you to kind of see how your deck is faring against certain matchups, and it's a very handy tool. And I'll link in the description. I'll put the link to. It's another way that you can help support me. I get like $1 every time someone downloads the tracker, so I'll be sure to include that in the comments below. But anyway, what I do every week is every couple of days I peruse through the latest Untapped Mythic players, and I kind of hand select the cards or the decks that look appealing to me. And part of this is just like I've been doing this a long time, so I kind of know what to look for. Things like, if you're doing this yourself, because this is publicly available, what you want to do is you want to look for kind of the trend of what's placing where. So you can see that like 89.2%, 89.3% is kind of on the lower side, whereas 96.3 is a little bit higher. What this means is this person's MMR was a little bit higher when they hit into Mythic. And so I tend to use these a little bit more heavily than what the actual win percentage is. Because if you look at like, you can have like a really high win rate, right? 68.3%, but a low MMR, right? Which is less impressive than having like a higher MMR with the 96% in mono black. And what you'll see is that like the top MMR decreases slowly over time. So at the beginning, you know, you've got 96.3. If we continue scrolling up a couple hours later, we've got 96.2. We keep scrolling up a little bit further, we hit into 96.0 because there wasn't enough people hitting in at 96.1. And then eventually, you know, you get up to here and you've got 95.9 is the top that people will be placing in if they are like this person just came in, so I didn't actually see this one coming in before, but anyway, this is the top MMR, and then this over here is their win rate. I look for decks that are at least a 60% win rate and at least 50 matches. So kind of peruse through this data for you to bring you the meta breakers each week. And so the end result each week is this, where I can bring you a cultivated list of the lists that or the deck lists that had met my criteria. So, Dimir Bounce by Nansuba went 113 and 72 for a 61% win rate into Mythic. And the other thing that I like to do is talk about what this deck is doing differently from what I've seen being done in the most popular build for each archetype, right? So for Dimir Bounce, we can see a couple of things, right? So first off, we've got the, this is one of the upsides to running in the Dimir space is being able to run the double-pipped blue cards a little bit more readily. So we've seen like Enduring Curiosity in this archetype, because you have to, like, what differentiates this from its counterpart Esper Pixie, right? So this is kind of centered around the Get Out strategy, right? So this strategy dropped some swamps, went down a little bit on Kaido. Sometimes we see this come up all the way to 4 copies. If you've been a fan of the channel, you may have heard me talk about how Kaido Bane of Nightmares is worse in Best of 1 than it is in Best of 3. Dimir Bounce is you're going to more commonly see in Best of 3, so if you're adapting it to Best of 1, it's better to drop Kaido's because Kaido is worse up against the mono-red matchups. We're also dropping 2 copies of the Flood Pits Drowner. We're dropping 1 Fear of Isolation and a single cut down. We're also dropping the Cryptomancer, which is a one of that we see sometimes in this archetype that can give something hexproof. And then we're also dropping the 4 copies of the Spyglass Siren. And the Spyglass Siren is is tied to Kaido. So the more that you drop Kaido, the more it makes sense to drop the Spyglass Sirens, because the Spyglass Sirens help enable the ninjutsu for Kaido to come in on turn 3. And we're also dropping the Soulstone Sanctuaries from the list and leaning a little bit more into tap lands than we typically see. So we've got the Undercity Sewers as well as the Restless Reef. And then we do have Ghost Vacuum coming in, and this one I think is because of the frustrations of Dimir Bounce does really well against decks like Boros Auras and things that have problems dealing with the repetitive removal in this deck. But anyway, it has no interaction with Azorius Omniscience, which is the 4-turn combo deck that's looking to get Omniscience out on turn 4 through a Boiler's Awakening, and so Ghost Vacuum can kind of slow that strategy down. It's no means a win just instantly against that archetype, because they do have ways of destroying your Ghost Vacuum as well as blast zones and things like that can kind of deal with this before they pop off their combo, but it certainly gives you more time. And let's see what else we have here. We have the single copy of the Spell Pierce. This one we see kind of come and go. And then new cards, though, we've got the Corroding Dragonstorm. This one, new enchantment that kind of is being explored because it gives you the life gain and Surveil too. And being able to bounce it back and forth with your like Fear of Isolation or your This Town Ain't Big Enough, you still have sort of the Pixie Self-Bounce effect in this archetype, and so this gives you some life stabilization. Haven't seen it explored hugely because everybody's been kind of obsessed with Esper Self-Bounce because of the Kirin that we got in Tarkir, but we'll see. It's definitely one to keep your eye on. And then, like I mentioned, running 2 additional copies of the Get Out, because this is really like one of the payoffs for being in the blue-black space instead of in white-blue-black. All right, and a little rambly this morning, so please forgive me, but I hope this finds you well. Number 2 here, and this is again in no specific order, it's just kind of throughout the weeks picking up stuff that. Oh, the other thing too I forgot to mention is I don't include things that are in the top 8 that I'll be covering tomorrow, right? So there's lots of decks in mono red, Azorius Omniscience, Boros Auras, like all of these things that meet the criteria. These are ones that are specifically off meta that I think deserve a little bit of attention, and they're typically best of 3 strategies. So if you play best of 3, they kind of transfer over there a little bit, right? So this is Jeskai Oculus, another best of 3 deck. This one went 29-16 for a 64% win rate, so it was technically 45 wins. And if they lost all 5 of their matches, it would be 58%. But it was close enough, and I wanted to kind of talk about what's happening in Jeskai Oculus. That because like we haven't really talked about it yet, but Winter Night Stories definitely fits into this strategy really well. We're seeing it explored in best of 3, most certainly. Being able to draw 3 cards and then discard 2 is a really great way of getting Abhorrent Oculus into your graveyard, and fits into the strategy very well. Same with Tursa Light Shatter. So Tarkir also got Tursa, which allows a similar thing: discard up to 2 cards and then draw that many cards. Is a really good way of enabling your Abhorrent Oculus. And you can also discard stuff that you then play the Abhorrent Oculus from your hand. You know, if you just need to get 6 cards in your graveyard. So if you don't have the Recommission or the Helping Hand, sometimes it's right to not discard the Abhorrent Oculus. So just keep that in mind. So what we see in comparison to the most popular build is that they dropped like 1 Terse Light Shatter. They've dropped a Props Eidectic Memory. I do also list all of the popular builds as I kind of go through them on Moxfield. So if you're curious about like what that is, you can kind of reverse engineer it or just copy it from Moxfield. Shivan Reef was dropped by 1. We're also dropping the 4 copies of the Spyglass Siren. We're dropping a Thundering Falls and a 3 copies of the Glacial Dragon Hunt. And Glacial Dragon Hunt is another one that's being explored in this archetype. It's the blue-red one that we got from Tarkir that allows you to draw a card and discard a card, and then if you discard a non-land card, it deals 3 damage to a creature. So it also is another enabler for Oculus and is being explored. This one though is going a little bit more less strictly into the blue-red, and bringing it, a little bit more like white sources in. So we've got an island and a mountain. We're bringing in the 2 copies of the Spell Pierce. We've got an additional copy of Recommission. Usually we see a 4/2 on this. Battlefield Forge got upped by 1. Torch the Tower got up to 4 full copy. This one's good for, again, talking about the differences between Best of 3 and Best of 1. Best of 1 has a lot more mono red aggro in it than Best of 3 does, although we're seeing more mono red in Best of 3 as well. But Torch the Tower is going to be good against the aggro matchups, and so bringing these in can kind of slow down the early aggro creature-based strategies. We've got a full copy of the Steam Core Scholar. Typically we see this one kind of cap out at 3. Can be a little bit awkward of a card. It's kind of the alternative strategy if they have a way of attacking your graveyard that you can just win through a very large Vigilance Flyer. And then this one's bringing in 4 copies of the Marauding Mako, and this is one that we got in Aether Drift. Not typically included in a lot of the lists that I see, but it does fit well with the strategy of like, let's make an alternative threat really big through all of our discard. And since we did get Tursa and the Winter Night Stories, we do actually have more discard synergies. So it'll be interesting to see if cards like this that specifically get the payoffs from discarding fit better into the strategy with more enablers. Alright, and last but not least is Azorius Control by Calgaris. It went 66-27 for a 71% win rate into Mythic. And this one has no changes to the most popular build that I've been seeing on the tracker. You have also no new cards from Tarkir. So we are seeing the Blue Dragon, the River's Regent one that can draw cards has been kind of fitting into Azorius Control. Hard to say whether or not that's going to stay in the long term. I think that it actually looks like a pretty good one to explore in Azorius Omniscience, which maybe we'll get to at some point. But it's definitely being explored right now. Seems like a decent card. But yeah, Azorius Control is one that typically you won't hear a lot about in the top 8 in the meta, but is a fan favorite. Like there's some people who absolutely love Azorius Control, and it is based on how well you can play it, right? Azorius Control in the hands of a new player is probably one of the worst decks out there. And then Azorius Control in the hands of somebody who knows the meta really, really well is one of the harder decks to beat, right? 71% win rate over almost 100 games. If you know which cards you need to counter and win, Azorius Control can definitely be one of the more impressive strategies in Best of 1. So, with that, though, I hope this finds you well. I hope you're having a good Sunday. If you like this sort of thing and you like tuning in each week to hear the hand-selected meta breakers and my ramblings about what I know about playing way too much Magic the Gathering, consider becoming a YouTube member. It is the best way to help support me. There are several tiers ranging from like $2 a month to $25 a month. Whatever you can do to help me definitely helps keep my spirits high and helps me keep doing this thing. Because right now, I make about $200 a month doing this, and it's not minimum wage, and I would like it to be at least like, somewhere closer to that range. So if you can help me out on that, it's greatly appreciated. And thank you to everybody who has been a part of my YouTube, who is a YouTube member. And then also, just thank you for being part of my community. On Tuesday, I will be opening up the community deck tech, where I'll take a look at your guys' brews and give you my suggestions. We'll be opening up the list. Submissions will open on Tuesday, and then the following Tuesday we'll actually get to talking about your guys' builds. So it's been a super fun, I've really been enjoying the meta. I think that the limited especially has been really enjoyable, and like I said too, climbing to Mythic has had a lot. I used like 4 or 5 different decks to climb to Mythic and I'll need to improve this to numbers later. But all in all, I really think that I'm surprised that there's so much complaints about the standard meta right now. I'm a little flabbergasted. So anyway, I've rambled enough. Take care, everybody, and I will see you all tomorrow for the Best of 1, Best of 3 meta review.